Olé is a word that conjures up different meanings for different people, but jazz is probably quite far down that list. It's a word that's followed me for 30 years through the twists and turns of my life. A through line, a thread that connects disparate experiences. Experiences that come from the same life yet seem reminiscent of different times, different places. Experiences that feel in many ways like they feature a completely different person. Olé. It's not a memory that originates in childhood holidays in the sun lounger resorts of 1980s Spain. Olé. Nor from a burning passion for flamenco. Olé. The olé that's followed me from my student days, tucked in a shared tenement flat off Glasgow's Byres Road, is in fact Olé Coltrane, a work of art released in 1961 by legendary American jazz musician John Coltrane. A record tinged with Spanish and African influences. A record featuring an almost unimaginable array of jazz royalty. John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Freddie Hubbard, Eric Dolphy, Reggie Workman, Art Davis, Elvin Jones. A record that comes as close as any to a soundtrack of my life. Glasgow, one afternoon in October 1994. I might have imagined the autumn leaves, but in the story of my life that I tell myself, that first day when I dropped the needle, I was lying on a makeshift double bed as the Glasgow autumn rattled the old tenement windows that framed the high ceiling and worn floorboards of the room. I will forever connect the twists and turns of Coltrane's solos with swirling leaves in burnt orange, reds and yellows, a colour palette mirrored in the beautiful cover of the album itself. I'm not even sure how the album ended up in my possession. You tend to think of these life-changing moments as something you'll always remember, but I have no memory of buying it, borrowing it, or being given it by someone else. I suspect it may have been a random purchase that came from my deepening love of hip-hop music, the gateway drug for so many to a previously undiscovered plethora of soul, jazz and funk sounds. The budget turntables, purchased with a student loan, rested on a wobbly table on an equally uneven wooden floor. That's as much as I remember before lying back on that bed and staring at the ornate ceiling as Olé enveloped me for the very first time. I had no idea back then that it was a record that would join the dots of my life. Downbeat, Yokohama, May 25th, 2015. I can pinpoint the day with the help of surrogate memory. Photos on my phone have forever stamped it with a date and time. It's not difficult to imagine this place emerging from the rubble of the Second World War. Even now it still has a slightly chaotic and makeshift feel as the small streets thread in and out of each other like a tightly woven fabric. It's an ugly place which derives its beauty from the night, when it comes alive with shop fronts, bars, neon signs, cut-price drink deals and the hum of people in search of something on a night out. A large red cutout of a double bass points the way up a rickety staircase that we climb gingerly. It's a jazz kissa. Literally a coffee shop and bar space for listening to jazz on vinyl and high-end audio equipment. And the first in a flush of joints I've been photographing before they vanish forever from the landscapes of Japan's towns and cities. We gave up talking about half an hour ago. No point. Even turning and facing each other made little difference in the murky light. Like some teenage bedroom, it's dimly lit in here, the walls painted black and plastered with images. They're fixed in place with a thin layer of varnish, yellowed over the decades from the onslaught of cheap cigarette smoke and general decline. It's a yellow reflected in the Olé album cover that sits neatly inside the serving hatch, now divested of its contents as that unmistakable bass line begins. We sit facing the sound system side by side, like church or a temple. The sound assaults us in waves, making all attempts at conversation futile. Gestures to get another drink or signal a toilet trip prove the best way to communicate. In the tiny, silent windows that open between tracks, our voices seem suddenly deafening. Sound Advice Records, Belfast, December 1st, 2021. The skylights betray the dark Belfast night beyond as much as they offer little protection from the chill of the winter air. It may even be colder inside this warehouse space than it is outside. Its walls seep with history, and tonight they host a little more as an assembled audience sits gamely, shivering a little as Coltrane's solo soars through the space. The horn ricochets around the room as some tap their feet or nod sagely with closed eyes. Some stare straight ahead as the warmth of Olé washes over them. I never thought that I'd find the end of this thread that runs through my life in a city I've spent 30 years running from, physically and emotionally. Perhaps it's not the end, but simply another stage marker on a marathon not yet complete. And yet, I find myself standing in front of an audience of 30 people with only a few familiar faces for comfort, extolling the virtues and the personal and sentimental meaning of this album, asking these strangers to sit and listen in silence, to experience that feeling of immersive listening that perhaps can only truly be experienced in a jazz kissa. The kissa in which I sat myself on countless Tokyo nights and sticky Japanese afternoons. The kissa where I listened to Olé that night in Yokohama as memories of 20 years flooded my thoughts all the way back to their source, to that room in Glasgow, to that sensation of hearing a masterpiece for the first time. You can only ever hear any piece of music for the first time once. It's often impossible to control the circumstances, the when, the how, the why. I'm just lucky that for me, hearing Olé for the first time will always be that peaceful, solitary experience I choose to remember. Olé. As I wrap up by thanking people for coming, it blows my mind that I'm here in a city from which at one time I could not wait to escape. Here, imparting to strangers my passion for a project started in a country 6,000 miles away, that I ended up in by chance and then grew to love as my home for nearly 20 years. Playing this record that I love for others. Maybe 20 years from now, I might find myself elsewhere. And as the needle drops on that opening bass solo, the memories of this night, that night in Yokohama, and that autumn afternoon in Glasgow, will flow into one and lengthen once more this thread that has bound my life together. Olé.